And we are live. So we'll give about, I think, 2 minutes for people to join in and settle,
Sure,
and
sounds great.
we'll begin then. And by that time, I'll make it live on the Facebook as well.
Mhm. Everyone who's joining in, welcome, welcome, settle down, grab some water, grab a piece of paper and a pen if you want to take notes. We're going to start in the next couple of minutes. I see a friend of mine trying to just send a ping. Da, 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 da. Got a few people joining in. Let's wait for a couple more minutes. We can start at 4:05.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
All right. So we're live on the Facebook as well.
Mhm. Awesome. Let me just check the live stream. Share it as well. Let's check the live stream. Share it as well. Check the live stream. Okay, we can begin whenever you want. I'm ready. I guess our panelists are also, our participants are also ready.
All right. I've shared the link with you here.
Yeah.
All right. So I think we are good to begin. All right. So I'll just put this on for a while. Okay, so just want to, before we begin, just want to do a quick check with all the attendees. Are they able to see and hear us? If they're able to see and hear us, kindly raise your hands. Perfect. Okay, we are through and through, I guess. All right, so good afternoon, everyone. I'm Gurjashan Singh, VP Alliances and Client Solutions at Great Place to Study. I'd like to welcome our speaker for the day, Mr. Meghdut Roy Chowdhury, and all of you as well to the Great Place to Study's 10th Knowledge Webinar. We have a total of 17 webinars scheduled in this month, out of which 9 have already been completed successfully, and the remaining are going to take place over the course of the remaining month till 30th of April on various topics. You can get the details of all the other webinars and speakers from the link which I'm just posting on the group chat. Uh, uh, uh. All right, so feel feel free to explore the details about the other webinars as well on the link that I just provided. So I'd like to start by giving a little background about Great Place to Study. It is relatively a young organization that aims to bring about a positive change in the education industry and offer practical solutions to students and educators through its products. I'd also like to share a little about our one of the latest solutions for students, which is called Career Development and Acceleration Platform. It is a student engagement platform that facilitates career discovery and college search. It brings all the content in the world-class cinematic way with verified information on various career fields. It also helps students discover their careers on the basis of their inherent strengths and has a large video career library to inspire the students to make the best decision about their career on the basis of the verified information provided in the platform. I'm sharing the link in the group chat for everyone to explore this particular platform at their convenience. So feel free to go through it whenever you get time. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Meghdut Roy Chowdhury's profile to all of you. So he's an educationist, a serial entrepreneur, public speaker, and a change maker. He started his first company at the age of 19, a music recording studio by the name of Blooper House Studios, which has till date produced more than 2,000 albums and artists from across the world. Meghdut has a master's in management with a specialization in international business from HEC Paris, Stanford University, and Tel Aviv University. He is currently the Director of Global Operations at Techno India Group, one of the largest educational conglomerates in India, and has been driving a new wave of experiential interdisciplinary learning for adults through the recently established Offbeat CCU, a school of the future. He also runs a co-working space startup incubator called Technopreneurs, Surrogate Ventures in Kolkata. He has received the Eminent Young Entrepreneur Award at the Times Knowledge Icon 2018 in Kolkata for his work in the field of promoting young entrepreneurs and initiative in emerging technologies, and has a special interest in reviving the independent music scene of his hometown through promoting live gigs and events regularly through his live music venue, Top Cat CCU. In today's session, you all are going to witness him speaking about student entrepreneurship, impact entrepreneurship, pre-incubation for students, participation in various events like hackathons, coding boot camps, and other preparation material, and also about funding, which is angel investor versus VC. Uh, the last point, or rather, I would say my favorite point, which he's going to speak on, is the curiosity quotient. I'm really looking forward to actually, make you speaking on that. Uh, uh, with this, I would like to, request Meghdut to actually take over and, start with this webinar from here. Meghdut, over to you.
Perfect. Am I audible? I hope I'm audible, visible, etc. I'm going to pull up my presentation. Just give me 1 second and we'll be live. Hi, everyone. How's it going? Hope that we're all staying safe. Tough times. This is probably my 10th, 12th webinar that I've been doing. I don't think I've taught that much or taken that many sessions sitting at home ever in my life. And in fact, I think, this entire coronavirus crisis has been somewhat of a great leveler, if I may say so, that from around the world, it's brought people closer, if nothing else, just because of the way that we use internet. And I was just thinking to myself the other day, what if, what kind of a situation did people go through when there was the Spanish flu, for example, or when there was the First or the Second World War? It took months for people to get information from one place to another. And all of these things, I mean, right now, the fact that we're all in our homes, in the safety of our homes, we can watch this particular webinar in any way on our phones or on our computers. That was not possible. There was no way to entertain ourselves back in the day. And all of that happened because of innovation. All of it happened because of entrepreneurs, people who are out there changing the status quo, changing the very fact that, we need to bring people closer. Companies like Zoom, which have made our lives so much easier right now, things like WhatsApp, through Facebook, all of these other technical tools that are available to us. And all of this happened because there was somebody back in the day who thought, who was curious enough to think, what, we need solutions to make people have a better time, coming closer together, interact, build communities. And so this is why I guess I have always been so attracted to the idea of entrepreneurship, and also of having the curiosity quotient that Gurjashan very rightly said, I will be taking on as part of the webinar today. So once again, for anyone who's joined afterwards, welcome to today's webinar. I'll be talking primarily about entrepreneurship. Firstly, thank you, Gurjashan, for the wonderful intro. It's very kind of you. I've been very fortunate, ladies and gentlemen, that I've been able to do a lot of the things that I envisioned when I was a child. The path that I thought that I wanted to take in my life, I think I've done quite a bit of it, and a lot of it has had entrepreneurship as a very core tenet of the entire story. So my name is Meghdut Chowdhury. I'm primarily an educationist. We run a bunch of schools, colleges, and universities in India. We're currently in 12 states and under the brand name of Techno India Group. And this by itself, I think, is one of the biggest entrepreneurial stories that have come out of education in recent times, especially in West Bengal. So I will talk about that a bit later as well. I think it's very important that I give a bit of background. But let's dive straight into the topic. The first thing that I would like to talk about today is the innovation mindset, right? So if we remember, I was talking about how the world used to be in general very, very different a few years ago. Even if you go back 20, 30 years, people were not so close together. You know, information delivery was very different. Let me take you to a time back, let's say 1,000 years, right? So 1,000 years ago, there used to be these people who, say, for example, the feudal lords, say, for example, people like kings and queens and the lords in general, or who owned huge amounts of land. They used to be the people who would be the bridge or be the barrier between people on one side and information on the other side, because all of the information was guarded in their libraries and it was not accessible to common people. You know, fast forward 1,000 years, and right now you see that there is an overdose of information. Everywhere you see, there's so much information. Like if you look at your WhatsApp every morning, apart from all of the good morning, good night texts that you would receive from all your business associates or on your family WhatsApp groups, apart from that, all of the useless information that is available to us right now, which really in a way deters us, I believe, from a path of what we want to achieve today. You know, this is a constant struggle that I have every morning. I wake up, I look at my WhatsApp and I'm like, oh my God, all of these things have to go through again today in order to go through my day. And it really brings me down, I think, sometimes. And I think it's also a big impediment to the innovation mindset, because in general, whenever human beings need to innovate, they need to keep their minds open. They need to keep, not have a million things to do or a million WhatsApp messages to check. If you have to think outside the box, because otherwise you're constantly solving problems. Otherwise you're constantly, doing crisis management. There's not very much time to think, which is why I feel that the current coronavirus crisis has actually been a huge boon for entrepreneurs in general, or will be. We don't know how long it's going to continue, but because for the first time in our lives, I believe we have so much time. We have time which we would normally be spending, or spending is actually a wrong word, which we would probably have been wasting in our day-to-day commute, meeting useless people sometimes. If you're owning a business, or if you run a business, or if you're an entrepreneur, a lot of people who ask for favors. There's a lot of things that you have to do. So there's a lot of things that you spend time on mundanely without it actually having a graph. And what that normally prevents you from doing is having that canvas to be able to innovate. And whenever their push comes to shove, we've always seen that. Right after the World War II finished, we saw the rise of industrialization, and we saw all of these industries, factories coming up, and all of that happened because when push came to shove, people needed to innovate. People needed to go out of the way, to think out of the box, to be able to solve problems. And that's what traditionally entrepreneurs have always done better than anybody else. They have been able to think out of the box. So the innovation mindset, I believe, is something that when the traditional way of looking at jobs, careers in life, and in general is not good enough, that's where you need to focus towards innovation. Now, innovation is everywhere around you. I think at the time that we are in right now, in 2020, it's the easiest time to be an entrepreneur. And I'm not talking just about 2020 March onwards when we've been in lockdown. That's not the time. I'm saying as a time, as a whole, in the last 3-4 years, I think entrepreneurship has been very, very accessible, a lot more accessible than it was before. Why do I say that? I was talking about information being very hard to reach back then, but because of the internet right now, it's a lot more easier to access information in general. Yes, sometimes there's a lot of information, but again, access to information is a lot easier. Now, if you had to be an entrepreneur 40 years ago, there was a lot of hurdles that you had to go through. People, first of all, would say, oh, you want to give up your regular job and go on and be an entrepreneur. There was a lot of societal pressure. There was a lot of negativity that would come from people's homes, people's offices. In general, there was a lot of impediment to being an entrepreneur. Now, the way that when we were younger, people would pick up a guitar and do music in order to be more popular. Entrepreneurship itself has also become one of those fields. God forbid, I think I'm going to get a lot of hate for that online. I hope not. But people have taken up entrepreneurship as a lot more of an acceptable career choice than it was, a few decades ago. So all of you who are watching today, I'm guessing all of you have an interest in entrepreneurship, in the field of entrepreneurship, and all of you want to, in some way or the other, change lives through this particular career. It's a lot. You're in a lot better place than our fathers and grandfathers were. So kudos to having come this way. Kudos to being curious enough to be reaching out and joining a knowledge webinar on entrepreneurship. I'm guessing a lot of the people are going to be regular students, 12th graders, maybe first year, second year, third year college students, or even some master's students. I remember when I was in high school or in the very beginning of college, entrepreneurship was something that was very, very special to me. I started my first company at the age of 19. I started producing music. And it's a very interesting story I had with music because I was not a very good musician myself. And somehow just my love for music on one side and not being a very good musician on the other side, I had to figure out a way to kind of hack the system in order to be part of the music industry while not being a musician. So I started, I looked around, I asked people, and I figured that it was very, very essential that musicians in Calcutta or in West Bengal, for example, had a place to record their music by not paying too much money. And that's when I started Blooper House Studios. And that was the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey in a lot of ways. Even though, I think I grew up in a household itself, which was very entrepreneurial. My father, obviously being a patron for education in the east of India and now maybe throughout the country, I've always grown up in a household which has been very much focused on solving problems for society. And I think entrepreneurs are made of a different metal. I think you can't just become an entrepreneur overnight. It's a bit like the muscles in your hand. You can't do it overnight. It takes time and patience. And every time somebody says to you, especially if you're a student entrepreneur, and if you see lofty dreams, that, okay, one day I'm going to have $1 billion company. I'm going to be the CEO of a unicorn, and I'm going to lead the next generation of change. Don't forget that there is a huge path. There's a huge journey, which is not very simple. It takes a lot of sacrifice. It takes a lot of sleepless nights. And the more involved you get in this life of changing things through the innovation mindset by being an entrepreneur, it's not an easy road, but we will learn more about that today. Let's move on. First and foremost, if you are a student entrepreneur and you have lofty dreams, great, good for you. I am all there supportive. All of us are there supporting your dreams at any point of time that you need. But remember, the number one reason why businesses fail is because there's no market need for it. And nobody is going to tell you this on your face, especially if you live in a country like India, where validation comes a lot more easily. You have an idea, you send it to a few people, or you discuss it with your friends, and they're like, "Oh wow, yeah, idea hai, Sarji. Wow, you should implement this. It's a great idea." What happens sometimes is that idea might not have market validation because there's no need for it in the market. And we need to be wary of people who give you praise for no reason at all. It's good for motivation. It's good to be motivated. But at the same time, if you do not look at the world of entrepreneurship objectively, you're very, very likely to fail. Most of these ideas that we think of, every day when I wake up, I think I have about a dozen ideas. And out of that, 11 of them are absolutely shitty and I would never, try and implement them. Sometimes I do try though, because I think it's important to try out some things and fail rather than not doing it at all. But there's always that one idea there is a chance that has a chance of success, I would say. And that even that one idea, it is not going to become a successful product or a service or a business if you don't put in the hours for it, if you don't build a team for it. We are going to talk about all of these points in detail, but remember this one lesson that I want you all to go home with today is that the number one reason why businesses fail is because there's no market need, which means if you have to start a product or a service tomorrow, you need to make sure that there is a need for it in the market. Which brings us to our next point, which is impact entrepreneurship. What on earth is impact entrepreneurship? Now, a lot of people, I am a huge fan of this show called Shark Tank. I don't know if you've seen the show, it's on Netflix as well, where a bunch of American investors sit across a table and, there's a bunch of people coming and pitching random ideas. And, sometimes you'll have people coming and talking about absolutely ridiculous ideas like, oh, I made a wine for cats. First of all, why does your cat need wine? I have 6 cats at home. I'm a huge fan of cats. But having said that, I don't think a wine for cats is at all an important thing. On the other hand, if you're looking at a way to really build, leverage your resources and tools and all the learnings that you've had and your beautiful, brilliant ideas that you have, one out of those 12 ideas that you'll have every single day, which you feel might have a life-altering position, think of the target audience. Think of the people that you would be serving through this idea. Because remember, it's not easy to come up with solutions which truly, truly change humanity. If we look at some of the biggest companies that have come up in the last 10, 15 years, one of the companies that I absolutely love, and I think all of you love, is probably Uber, right? And Uber as a company has completely revolutionized the way that we look at transportation, in spite of not having a single car. We all know about the case study of Uber. And all of it started because a couple of recent college graduates in San Francisco figured that just reaching out to taxis was very difficult, and that it would genuinely help people, that instead of getting people to go to their taxis, you could just call the taxis to yourself. That was a huge gap that they were able to solve. And which is where I think impact entrepreneurship, I mean, I don't know if we can call Uber an impact entrepreneurship venture anymore, considering the scale that it's grown to. But what we can definitely say is it definitely solved a human need. And we as entrepreneurs, we as curious people, as people who have the innovation mindset, we need to make sure that every single idea we think of implementing, it goes through a foolproof process wherein we know that the people who should be targeted for this are people who genuinely need this product. Let's not make wine for cats. I mean, at a point of time where we're living in right now with the coronavirus crisis, if you're an entrepreneurial person, I bet you have thought of 10 different things that you can do to make society get back on its feet right now, right? I mean, we're going through one of the toughest times we've ever had. Maybe our parents or our grandparents have ever seen as well. Unless you've been amidst full-fledged war, I don't think a situation like this has ever come to our forefront. And if we, as the next generation workforce or as the next generation of entrepreneurs, are not able to predict what are the problems that we'll be facing in the post-COVID world, we're not doing justice to our tags as entrepreneurs. Even if you're students, in fact, if you're a student or a teacher watching this right now, a lot of students have written to me, sir, I have this idea that I would like to run by you. I mean, yes, great. Having ideas are great, but do you have an implementation plan? Do you have a pitch deck? Do you have an idea? It can be a piece of paper that you have scribbled on, but do you have something concrete and a plan of action? Because ideas, let me tell you, my dear friends, are usually useless, because unless they are implementable, all of those ideas are worthless. Just like if you look at, a lot of people write PhD papers, right? And a lot of PhD professors or senior professors might not very much like the comments that I make, but a lot of times nobody other than the PhD professors themselves read their PhD papers or they read their thesis. Why is that? Because academia in general is also one of those fields which only talks to itself. If you looked at all the amazing ideas that are lost because they get stored in stacks and stacks of very dusty PhD thesis. It's a shame because there could be a lot of those ideas could be very, very implementable, except entrepreneurs don't take it up, which is why I think one of the best models of entrepreneurship that I've seen coming out of India recently is that IIT Delhi very recently announced that they were allowing people to, when they're pursuing a PhD, to actually start a full-fledged business, to start a company, to start a startup, rather than writing a PhD, which most probably nobody's ever going to read. Unless, of course, it gets it's one of the top 1% PhD thesis, which gets annotated, which a lot of people quote. So coming back to the initial idea, your ideas are not good. I mean, however brilliant people say your ideas are, they need to in some way be implementable. Impact entrepreneurship. Let's get to the point now. I think we live in a world where we've seen, even in the one short month of us being in lockdown, that the very way that we look at the world has changed a lot. Just being, just the fact that there's not that many people out on the streets, which means there's not that many cars out on the streets, which has already made the overall air quality index of all cities across the world reduce drastically, which means that we're breathing better. The chances of us dying of a lung disease have been significantly reduced just by the fact that all of humanity is stuck to their homes right now. Now, if you extrapolate that, how do we take this ideology and spread it out to a post-COVID world as well? Let's take this as a lesson. Let's take this COVID crisis as a lesson. How do we spend our time on this earth a bit more responsibly? How do we come up with solutions to problems a bit more responsibly? One of the other stark impacts of the corona crisis that I personally felt was that people the haves and the have-nots, there are various different ways of looking at this problem, but I think the haves had it a lot more easier during the crisis, being in lockdown, having savings at home, people who are privileged in general, just being able to, you and I, we're all privileged. The fact that we are able to enjoy a webinar on entrepreneurship while there are people out there who have no idea where their next meal is going to come from. People are struggling with the fact that they do not have access to essentials, to rations. How can we, as the privileged society, have think more responsibly, think more empathetically, in order to be able to solve problems which need to be solved right now? In the post-COVID crisis, a lot of businesses are going to cease to exist. And I don't know if you're going to trust me on this or not. I think about 80% of all businesses are going to see severe crunches, and if they're not able to deal with that right now, they will see their businesses overall going down. Now, here I feel is also an opportunity for you entrepreneurs want to be, who can look at the post-COVID world as the time when you start off your entrepreneurial journeys, and we get to things that you can do as a student, obviously. So let's talk about student entrepreneurship opportunities. I'm guessing a large segment of today's population are either students or people who are associated with the student entrepreneurship segment. So let's call you educationists currently dealing with students who want to be entrepreneurs. And if you look at some of the big well-proven models of entrepreneurship out there in the world, I love the fact how a lot of universities, like let's say the Babson College in the United States, have made it a rule wherein a lot of the professors at various colleges are encouraged to be part of students' entrepreneurial journeys. I feel that's beautiful because, number one, students are always looking for mentors, right? In and out of the classroom. Classrooms are places where you primarily discuss academia, but the place right outside of your classroom is where you can really validate your business models as well. As part of some of the talks that I've done in various colleges, the IITs, IIMs, NITs, and some of our Techno India group colleges as well. One of the very interesting features, one of the interesting talks that I remember was during one of our talks in one of our colleges in Jharkhand, in Ramgarh Engineering College, and it's a remote town. We had somebody with us that day, this gentleman called Andy Singh, who was from Ramgarh and currently lives and works out of Canada. very successful entrepreneur as well. And he was sharing this story of when he used to be a student of a local Hindi medium engineering college back in the day in that particular small town in Jharkhand itself. He created his first business by selling talk time on phones. Back then, phones used to have a limited amount of talk time. If you had a Vodafone, you have to scratch a card and then add a number of credits to your phone. If you're right now in first year of college, you probably have not had a phone where you had to refill talk time. But back then, the same thing used to happen for ISD calls and STD calls as well. So for his batchmates and for his hostel mates, he started by actually putting in a bit of his pocket money, buying a phone and some extra talk time, and selling talk time to his friends. So his friends would not have to buy a phone or buy talk time and could just buy it for himself and pay per use. And he amassed enough money to actually put himself through college, and he was able to do that in college itself. And I genuinely believe some very, very interesting business models have come out of the various colleges of the world. I don't know if you've heard of this company called The Minimalist, but it's a very, very interesting design agency that came out of an IIT. And I met the guys from Minimalist and were talking about it, and they're one of the most successful design agencies right now. And all of that began, the idea for Minimalist, which is now, I think, LinkedIn's best place to work of the year 2019, and they've won so many best startup awards and all that. A very, very big team now as well. I think they've got 250, 300 people. All of it started because they needed, their college IIT, I can't remember which IIT, but I think it was IIT Bombay. The students needed to print, various placards or stuff for their fests, and they needed people to do logos for it. So these two young guys, they actually started making logos on Microsoft Paint, and they just taught themselves a little bit on how to do better logos, create some brochures, create some branding, some banners, posters, and all of that. And all of that started in college. Some very, very interesting startup opportunities lie for you, my dear students, whoever's watching this, be it on Zoom webinar right now, or on the Techno India University page, or on Great Place to Study. A lot of the entrepreneurship opportunities are available for you right where you are right now. Don't cease to grab them when you can, because you're not going to get a chance to participate in college fests with people who want the same thing as you, who are sitting right next to you. It's easy to be a leader on campus. It is easy to provide services, even if, say, for example, your college does not have a printing service. A few of your friends can buy a printer, take the permission from your college, a printer, scanner, start a little unit which is manned by people. Or if, for example, your college does not have a souvenir store, why don't you go and talk to some people who make souvenirs and create a little corner in your college where people can buy college memorabilia for. So these are various little small ideas which can make your entrepreneurship dreams come true. We don't know. Say, for example, you have an interest in photography, and you know that there are a lot of other people around you who would also be very interested in providing their services on photography. Why don't you start a localized community and see if you can provide that service professionally to people? If the services are good, people will buy. Do not wait to finally think of yourselves, okay, I will be an entrepreneur. Let me finish college. Let me get that job that to make my parents happy, and I will at some point start my entrepreneurial journey. I think that makes me very unpopular to parents sometimes when I tell them that if you have to start, even a lot of our college principals, when I tell them your students need to start their entrepreneurial journeys within college as well, because unless you have a real life experience of being able to understand how business works, of being able to understand how buying and selling itself works, how do you solve problems on the go, it's going to be very hard for you to do that after you're in college, right? So the journey itself needs to start earlier. And at a time when you're in college, I think you do not have as much responsibilities as you will when you finally have that job. Don't forget that when you have your dream job, wherever, whichever company it is, you are going to be slogging yourselves off, because you will not get a lot of time to think outside. And remember when I said for the innovation mindsets, it is very important that you have that blank canvas, because without that you cannot innovate. You can't go out of your way and innovate if you have 20,000 other things to do every single day. So college is a great time to start your entrepreneurial journeys, and it doesn't matter if you succeed or if you fail. On average, 90% of all entrepreneurship ventures fail. That's not the sad part though, because the sad part is that 90% of the 10% of the ones which do not, I mean, so say 90% of all the startups fail and then 10% succeed, right? But the problem is, out of those 90% which fail, 90% of those actually never try it again. And when was it that you tried something for the first time and you became very good at it? I don't know if you're on TikTok, or if any of you make videos. Think of the time when you made your first video. I'm sure if you go back to that time, you're not going to like yourself on that video even now. Or if you've posted a photo, go back to your first ever Facebook photo that you posted, take a look at it. I'm sure you're going to be like, oh my god, this is what I had posted. I was 16, I was 18, I was stupid. And the entrepreneurship works the same way. You think you have a great idea. You think that, oh, you know what, this idea is going to make me a multimillionaire. Don't do it for the money. There are enough smart people out there in the world who've probably thought of an idea, already done it. When is it worth doing it? If it actually means something to who you are. If you wake up in the morning and you think every single day, you know what, this is one problem which is really bugging me, and I really wish that I would be the person to solve that problem, irrespective of if I make money in the first 2 to 3 years or if I have to slog my ass off. But at some point, I will make money and I will be able to support my family and all of that. So do it because you care. Don't do it because of the money, because entrepreneurs who do it only for the money, they don't get very far, because then you get distracted by the money making process as opposed to the actually solving a problem process, right? So let's get into this slide. Just my slides, if you've seen, they're usually quite minimalistic. Just a couple of pointers for you to keep track of the conversation. College fests, we spoke about that already. Being a leader on campus, again, very easy to do. It also shows entrepreneurial skill. Things I think that I did successfully when I was in college, which also has also helped my entrepreneurial journey, not just in college, in fact, in school itself. I was always somebody who liked being on stage. I always have been somebody who's liked having a mic in my hand and addressing people. I recently, in fact, was going through some old albums, and I found a photo of mine from when I was in class 4 or 5. I don't know, I was a baby basically, and on stage hosting my annual function or something. And it's very important for certain people within any organization to be spokespeople for the organization. And these are people who are usually, say, the CEOs of the organizations, the people who are able to sell ideas, who are able to sell dreams. This is an important lesson to be learned if you want to become an entrepreneur. Start at some point. If you're in school right now, high school, or if you're in college, it's never too late, honestly. If you can take an opportunity of addressing people, of picking up. I also do a session on public speaking. I did one a couple of weeks ago. I'm sure I'll do more. Feel free to reach out to me. Happy to give you tips on that. But being a good public speaker, having a good morale when you're on stage, and irrespective of what kind of stage it is, be it on a stage in front of 5,000 people or in front of 5 people at a board meeting, it is very important to speak with conviction. It is important that when people are listening to you, they actually believe in what you're telling them. So yeah, become a leadership on campus, be it a college campus, school campus, whatever it is, or at your companies as well. If you're working at a company currently and you want to switch over and become an entrepreneur, it's never too late. It's all about finding that passion. In fact, according to statistics, we have noticed that the most successful entrepreneurial ventures are started by founders who are in their mid 30s, early 40s, and have at least had the experience of 1 to 2 failed startups that they have taken enough lessons from. And it makes sense, when you're in your late 30s, early 40s, this is the time when you have really seen all of it. You've probably gotten frustrated of a 9 to 5 job. You just want to make it big. You've had enough of people showing you dreams. You've had enough of people telling you to work for them, where in fact, you've not been able to implement your dreams. So there's always a way. And we've also seen entrepreneurs who are 55, 60 years old. The guy who started Airbnb, I think he was 54 years old when he started the company. There's a lot of people who do it very late in life as well, when they realize their real calling was for entrepreneurship and not for sitting at a desk job and maybe getting scolded by their boss. So it needs to come from within. It shouldn't be because people say entrepreneurship is cool that you do it. You should do it because you feel that you can build a positive impact on society through that. So moving on, pre-incubation. This is a very important thing that is now more and more becoming acceptable within our college spheres. In fact, when I moved back to India in 2017, pre-incubation as a concept did not really exist in colleges in West Bengal. So we started Technopreneur Surrogate Ventures late 2016, early 2017, which was an incubator for startups, especially focusing on student entrepreneurs. And we've seen some very interesting business models come out from there. So at Techno India University, for example, we have this particular course called the Entrepreneurship Skill Development Program, where every single student, and if you're a faculty member or a student of DIU, you probably have gone through this process many times already. But it's something that I'm very proud of. I think the fact that our students get to work on real life problems from the very first year of college right through to their final year. Every semester they work on a business plan, a prototype, and be it a website, be it an app, be it a business model for an impact entrepreneurship venture, be it whatever at all, students get that opportunity. And this is something that is meant to bring out that entrepreneurship mindset in. Because a lot of times when you talk about entrepreneurship, the first things you hear is a couple of buzzwords: funding, VCs, investors, multi-million dollar, billion-dollar startup, you have a unicorn. All of these things are on one side. What you really need to focus on, my dear friends, is the mindset itself, because an entrepreneurship mindset is very different from an entrepreneurial venture. If you are an entrepreneurial person in general, you will find solutions to day-to-day problems, and you know who you are. I can't see any of you right now because we're in the webinar format, but I'm looking at you, in spirit, and I know that there's at least half of you on this who are watching right now who know that deep down inside you have this innate, skill to solve problems. You constantly look for ways to do things differently. You constantly, okay, this is not working out. Why don't I try it this other way? This is not working out. Why don't I reach out to this XYZ person on LinkedIn and see if they can help me solve my problem? I've seen so many of my students do it, and it makes me so happy when I get messages from students on LinkedIn telling me that, oh, I've worked on this idea. So not all the ideas are great. I never sugarcoat it when I say that, I don't think this is going to work. You might have to rework it. But at least the fact that people put in the effort of coming up with an idea, coming up with a possible solution to solve a problem that they see around them, that's the first step to becoming an entrepreneur. And pre-incubation is more and more available to colleges at the college incubators, thanks to, in a large part, to our governments as well, which have been pushing for a lot of incubation facilities within colleges, especially private and also government engineering colleges. Hackathons, I think, are very interesting as well. I am a huge believer in the hackathon mindset. So I will talk a little bit more about hackathons. Let's leave this aside for a while. I have a dedicated slide on it. Boot camps, I think, are also very interesting because a lot of the ones who get into the entrepreneurship field they don't look forward to becoming CEOs. There's also a lot of them who want to get into the tech side of things, so becoming a CTO or running the technical vertical of any startup. That's also very important. And boot camps are a great way. It's a great tool that is available to all of you at your colleges and online as well right now. So many of them, wherein you can learn a particular skill, be it coding, be it about a particular language that you've always wanted to learn, be it full stack or Node.js or something that is very much of use right now out there in the market. You can improve those skills sitting at home. There are various websites where, if you are also somebody who knows a little bit about web development, if you have the freelancer mindset, if you are somebody who wants to earn some money sitting at home, there are so many possibilities available right now. Look around you. Go to a Google search. You'll see there are websites like Skillshare, or there are websites like freelancer.com, which have the potential for you to provide your services, even if you're kind of good at particular coding language, or if you are good at web development or SEO, SMO, any of these topics, these are topics that you can hone your skills at when you're in college and when you pass out of college. These are things that will help you. Not one, it could help you get a better job, or it could help you become a very successful CTO of an organization as well, or work with the technical team because you know how to solve problems on the go. Also, I would like to quickly touch upon e-cells and IICs here. Pretty much all colleges right now, I think, have e-cells which are very, very active. I've actually befriended a lot of people at various e-cells where I've gone to talk. These are usually some of the most enterprising students at any institution. If you have an e-cell at your institution, find a way to join it or support it, or organize events through an e-cell. You also have IICs, which are right now available, uh, that are the institution's innovation councils, and you can take that opportunity from your respective institutions as well to be associated with entrepreneurial activities, because it's important that you take on as many of the activities as you can when you're in college, before it's too late. I mean, it's never too late, but college is the best time because very low responsibility. So we will get a little bit deeper into hackathons because it's my absolute favorite thing to do. And I'll talk about 3 different hackathons which I've been part of personally as a mentor. So first is the global hack. For those who do not know what a hackathon is, let me quickly explain it to you. A hackathon is usually a challenge that lasts between 48 to 72 hours, wherein a bunch of people together try and solve a problem. Now, it's very hard to solve a full-length problem in 48 to 72 hours. So what usually we do is we solve one of the small working components of a problem, which we call an MVP, minimum viable product. And we see that if an MVP works, then most probably the whole thing is going to work, right? So what happened recently was, because of the coronavirus, we saw that the way that the world functions right now is going to be very different from the way that the world will function when the crisis is over. So we basically came up with the idea of these hackathons. Give me a second. Let me grab a little bit of water, and I'll come back to the hackathons. So the Global Hack is literally the world's biggest hackathon that has ever been even tried out. And it started off in this tiny European country called Estonia. So there's this group of super enterprising people called Garage 48 who took it upon themselves that they will work towards giving a fast access route, an accelerated route for taking care of the COVID crisis right now. And they worked towards it. They created what was called Hack the Crisis, C point number 2, which happened across 55 countries, where each country came up with solutions on how they were dealing with the COVID-19 crisis. And I was very fortunate to be one of the mentors for Hack the Crisis in India. We worked across the weekend. It was 3 weeks ago. We worked through the weekend, 48 hours, no sleep, lots of Red Bull, and we came up with some amazing solutions. In fact, a few of the solutions, I'd like to quickly give a shout out to Team Wapsi, which was one of my favorite teams. They run by these couple of Bengali entrepreneurs who came up with a platform at that time within those 48 hours, which we are actually launching nationwide next week. So it's very funny how something that was built over 48 hours, I mentored them through that weekend, and now I'm actually working with them to build that product from scratch and implement it. It's a product that helps NGOs reach out to benefactors for rations, and for the potential beneficiaries to reach out to NGOs for rations. So it's an app that connects all of them together. Very, very interesting ideas came out of this hackathon. Everything from sanitization boxes for your day-to-day products to educational platforms that could be run on social media, to anything that could help us help the world itself see a better future when the crisis is over. And all of these benefactors, all these 55 countries then came together and made the Global Hack, which was literally the biggest hackathon ever attempted in the world. We had about 50,000 people on a Slack channel. You will not believe the kind of energy there was. If any of you are watching or are tuned in right now, who was part of the global hack, my God, what energy there was. It was Lithuania, Finland, of course, India, led by Fiki and by us at Techno India University, and a lot of other organizations which came together, a lot of countries, the US, Mexico, Italy, France, all of these countries came together and conducted the world's biggest hackathon. Everything was online. The whole thing was run through two apps. One was Slack and the other one was Zoom. And another sleepless weekend, and we saw projects come out of various different verticals, from education to entertainment to arts to, of course, the post-COVID crisis, and all of these, which goes on to show that innovation in general does not stop. Irrespective of where you are, if you want to make a positive impact on society, you will find a way. Human beings have always found a way. We are very, very resilient. No matter what war, what kind of social disaster, anything that's come, we've always come back stronger. And I feel that hackathons are a great way of coming back stronger every single time that we face any adversity in our lives. Something that's run very regularly in India is the Smart India Hackathon. I guess a lot of you have, if not participated in it, at least heard about it. It's the biggest hackathon in India. About 10,000 people participate every year in the software and hardware categories. We've also hosted Smart India Hackathon at various Techno India colleges. In fact, in 2018, we had a very, very successful run of the SIH software, and the ICT chairman, Dr. Anil Shahasrabudhe, was actually at our campus throughout the hackathon, because I think we really went above and beyond and organized a beautiful hackathon. But my point of talking about hackathons in general is that it's such a great tool that's available to you students. It wasn't available to us when we were younger, when we were in school or college. It's something that's available to you right now. Make use of it. Find out on the internet what hackathons are happening. A lot of hackathons keep happening online now that you're not able to be there physically. But again, once the lockdown is over, once we're able to be out in the streets and back to our schools and colleges, take that opportunity. Put yourself through some adversity, because the idea of a hackathon is to create a closed control group where a lot of innovation happens. And innovation happens the best when, for example, there is a lot of adversity around us. So of course, the COVID era is a good time for it, but join hackathons as many as you can in your free time, because it's going to not only make you better engineers, it's going to make you better potential entrepreneurs. And even if you don't become an entrepreneur, you know what, it doesn't matter, because if you go and join a company, you could still be an intrapreneur. I don't know if you know what an intrapreneur is, but if you've heard of the names of people like, say, Satya Nadella of Microsoft or Sundar Pichai of Google, these guys are not, you can't call them startup founders because they did not build these companies, but they were very, very talented employees who proved themselves through their out-of-box thinking skills, through their people management skills, through their operational skills, through their innovation mindset in general, that they were promoted to be the CEOs of the companies. And these people are known as intrapreneurs. These are people within organizations who actually act as entrepreneurs as well. Any of you, if for example, you do not end up becoming an entrepreneur, there's no harm in that, as long as you don't lose that entrepreneurship mindset within yourselves, because being an entrepreneur can actually also have a huge impact on society, wherein you join an organization and you have an accelerated path through it to reach the very top of the organization and have massive change in the way you look at the world. So all of that is a possibility, guys. Don't worry about it if your first startup or your fifth startup, for that matter, is not a multi-million-dollar company. It doesn't really matter. There's always a scope. There's always a light at the end of the tunnel. What about funding? I think this is one of the questions that I get asked the most, and I hope you're preparing your questions. I'm talking endlessly right now. I'm not looking at the chat boxes or the Q&A section. Feel free to write your questions. In fact, if you have any questions right now, just keep writing them on the chat box if you're on from a phone, or on the Q&A section, and we will come back to all the questions and answers. We'll try to answer as many of them as possible once we're done with the section. But one of the questions that I get asked the most, be it on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Instagram sometimes, when people will just ask you questions. And one of the major questions is, I don't have money. I come from a lower middle class background. You all talk is great, be an entrepreneur, do it, all of that. Where will I get funding from? So I have three. I thought I'd break it down into three parts. First part is that if you really genuinely care about something, you're going to find a way to beg, borrow, or steal and get your money. Well, preferably not steal. I guess that will not go down very well when you get caught. But definitely beg, borrow is a great way of doing it. A lot of very young entrepreneurs, when they start off now existing as multi-million dollar businesses, have started off as bootstrap businesses. These are called bootstrapped when you borrow money from your friends and family, or you sort of raise a small amount of capital from people whom you can spread your conviction to, and they believe in the idea as much as you do. So yeah, beg, borrow, and steal is definitely a good way of getting funding. Another way is, of course, reaching out to the more traditional ways of funding, which is angel investors, venture capitalists. Angel investors are people who are regular people like you and me, or maybe businessmen who care about a startup, and they would willingly put in a small amount of money in order to get some funds out, get some returns out of that. Venture capitalists are obviously, you have to be a startup of a particular size and have a certain amount of exponential growth to be able to reach out to a venture capitalist, or your idea has to be so good that it needs to make sense for them, that they see a multi-fold return coming out of it. And on this note, I'd actually like to talk about one of the startups that I had mentored at the very beginning. In fact, some of my students from Technoindia University as well, from the first year 2013 batch, Mohammad Hassan, who built TagMango, this nano influencer platform, and tried to help them out whenever needed. And they went international with the platform. They were in fact the first startup coming out of the state of West Bengal who's gone to Y Combinator, which is the world's biggest incubator, most well known definitely in the Silicon Valley in San Francisco. And currently they're sitting on a bunch of venture capital investment. So they had to go through a long process for that. And they had some very influential people that they knew as well. And along with that, they just had a great product, which they figured would sell if they went international. So they are rebranding and they're bringing the product back to India, and they're going to do a hopefully good job out of that. Very proud of these guys. But the third category, which I feel, is that some people who say, I don't have access to any of these. I come from a family where, none of my parents or my relatives or even my friends are willing to give me money. I definitely don't know any angel investors, or I don't know any venture capitalists. How am I going to make it work? And this is a piece of advice for all of those people. You don't need funding to begin a business. You need to be innovative. And on this part, I would actually like to talk a little bit about my idol, and the person I think that I've idolized from since I was 5 years old, which is my father, Professor Gautam Roy Chowdhury, who founded Techno India Group with 5 rupees. And however incredulous that sounds, it is true. He is somebody who was he belonged to a very lower middle class family, not even middle class, I don't think we can call that, in Bangladesh. His father, my grandfather, was a postman, and he's someone who just gave the gift of basic education to my father. But he, being a super innovative person, and somebody who genuinely believed in the transformative power of education, he moved to India in 1971. He brought his entire family to India, all his brothers and sisters, his father, his mother, brought them to India and started a family here, and started teaching kids in his garage about computer science. He was a smart guy, so obviously he was able to fund himself through IIT as well. He got a scholarship, and then he taught himself through school, went to IIT, ISI, worked for Tata for one day. Back then we were talking about circa 1985. Back then, if you have had a job with the Tatas, you would be stupid to leave that job. Right? He was working with telco, and then he left the job after working for only one day. Handed in his resignation letter, telling his boss that I will not be able to work for another person because I have a dream. My dreams are bigger than just being an engineer, and my dreams are bigger than any of this. I believe I can change the narrative of our state of West Bengal itself. And in 1985, he started teaching kids in his garage, teaching them computers. Back then, he didn't even own a computer, but he with books, and he spent 5 rupees on printing sheets of paper which he traveled on his cycle, distributed pamphlets throughout the village of Hooghly in West Bengal, and got his first batch of students. And he was able to make people believe in his dream. He was able to convert all of his initial students into prospective teachers. And when he started his first business vertical, which was computer training centers in West Bengal, he started in the most frugal innovation, with the most frugal innovation mindset possible. He did not buy, property to run his classes out of. He did not buy. He did not even have people on his payroll so to be able to pay for them. He saw that there was a future of computer education in the country of India, especially in West Bengal, which was back in that time was still a communist state. And he saw the future, and he was able to convince various schools and colleges to start computer training centers under his wing, which was at that time called ICEI, the Institute of Computer Engineers India, within those colleges and schools itself. And that became a huge hit. At some point, he was running 150 computer training centers. And this is way before Techno India even was called Techno India. It was called Institute of Computer Engineers India. And then he, of course, in 1998, he founded his first college, not just his first, his second college as well, which was Netaji Subhash Engineering College and Asansol Engineering College in Asansol. 2000, the word Techno India was founded, and of course Techno Main Salt Lake, which was back then just called Techno India College. It was founded in the year 2000. But this was one guy who never stopped for anyone to say, you know what, you need to get funding from here. There was no VCs, there were no investors, there was nobody who invested in his business. It was purely through merit, through looking at the world and trying to find what the future holds for us, and innovating on the ground, finding innovative solutions for it. We Indians, I'm guessing there's a lot of you from outside of the country as well. You have definitely heard of this concept called frugal innovation, which we in India call jugaad. And we are the founding fathers of this concept of jugaad, because traditionally India has always been a country where we haven't had access to all of the fancies and the whims of what an American entrepreneur does, and or any of the entrepreneurs from developed countries. So we've always had to do with what we have at hand, and we as the jugadus, as we call ourselves, or as the frugal innovators, if we are not able to go above and beyond the people who say, what about funding? How are you going to get that money from? You should tell them, hey, you know what? I'm going to figure it out. There's always a way. If you believe in the product and the product is good and you can sell the product, none of this will be an issue. So I will be taking on more questions about any of these topics as well in the future. We have a last couple of slides, I guess. A lot of you would be wondering, what next? We spoke, I think almost for an hour now on what entrepreneurship is, what entrepreneurship can do for you, what you can do as student entrepreneurs. What next? Here is where Gurjashan, this is where you pay attention as well. You're talking about the curiosity mindset, right? And this is one of my absolute, yeah. So the curiosity mindset, I feel, is something that really changes the narrative has the potential to change the narrative for any society. And I'll tell you why. We have a bizarre education system in India. And it hasn't changed, of course, from many, many years, even though we were some of the fastest movers in terms of education in the world from the time when we had the Takshashila model of education, which was the Guru Shishya model of education from that time itself. But not a lot of innovation has happened since then. And we still have that very hierarchical way of looking at education, which is why at schools, there was a recent study that was done by Stanford University, which took a look across the BRIC countries, which is Brazil, Russia, India, and China. And what they figured, they did a research on the curiosity quotient, or the critical thinking ability of students, and they figured that India stood at the very bottom of that list by far. There was a huge gap between the kind of innovation that was being done everywhere around the world. And this was school students, right? So we're talking about critical thinkers within schools itself, because we as a society, we always follow in a very unilateral way of education. Be it in class, every time you ask a question, your teacher says, you need to you need to stop, you need to not, you ask me a question after class or whatever. They try to avoid your question. Or even when you're home, when your parents tell you, you know what, don't talk at the dinner table, or this is a conversation we'll have later. Any of that. When every time a student, a young person asks a question, and a slightly older, slightly more mature person turns them down, a little bit of the curiosity within us dies. And collectively, the curiosity and the critical thinking ability of the entire nation dies a little bit with it. We as a nation, we've done amazing things. We have created some, traditionally, culturally, we've created amazing things. And going forward, if we want to set up the same thing with our products and services, we need to be asking questions. We need to be questioning ourselves every single day. What are we doing? Are we doing things right? Are we being curious enough? Are we, pausing at regular intervals and seeing if we're going on the right path enough? Because if we don't do that, it's going to be bad for society, for India as a country in totality. So this is my only, I don't think I can teach any of you guys a lot, but I think one of the only things that you will learn from me today is that never cease to be curious. If you have an idea, doesn't matter if it's one of the 12 ideas or 11 of the 12 ideas, even if you think they're good. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not so good. You have to take the leap of faith, because if you don't, there's nobody who's going to take that leap of faith on your behalf, right? If you have a problem, I say that very often. If you've been to any of my talks before, you'd know that I say, if you can't clean up your own backyard, nobody else is going to come and do it for you. We, the young generation, we are people who are going to change the narrative of our country's future. You are the country. I am also, almost 30, and I will, I'm already can be considered as a bygone. I think you can forget about me. Focus on yourselves. You guys are going to be changing the future of tomorrow. And for that, you need to be curious. You need to take that leap of faith. If you have an idea and you think there's a remote chance that it can be a good idea, as long as it does good to society and as long as it solves a pertinent problem and it's not wine for cats, you know, take that leap of faith. Reach out. There are enough people out there who would be very, very glad to take up your answers, take up your questions and answer them. There are so many people on LinkedIn. It's a great tool. Learn how to use LinkedIn. Learn how to use it to the benefit. Create a network. I think your network or your connections is what's going to set you apart from all the rest of the people in your offices when you get a job, or people around you, your classmates. That's a huge differentiation factor. And third and last point from my side for today will be, stop listening to naysayers, because there's going to be a lot of people who say, on the one side you have people who would say, oh, you're a genius, what a idea hai sir ji, ye to phar diya aapne, you aap next Bill Gates banoge. It's good, to hear it from one ear and leave it out of the other ear. If you do your work, yes, hopefully, fingers crossed, you're going to be the next Bill Gates. On the other side, there are a bunch of people who are very negative. You don't listen to them either. These people will be like, oh, ye kya faltu ka idea banaya hai, this will never work. A lot of people will say, ye to kaam kar chuka hai. This is already, when Ola was going to come to India, when it was supposed to start in India, a lot of people said, ye to Uber ka cut copy paste model hai. So then why did Ola work so well in India? If you look at Zoom, for example, it's very similar to Skype. Skype has been around. Skype, in fact, an Estonian company. It started almost 20 years ago, 22 years ago. And in 20 years, they've done lots of innovation. So how come during the COVID crisis, Zoom ended up having a growth of more than 1,000%, while the stocks of Skype fell rapidly? I think they had the negative 200% growth, which is like a 200% decrease in their stock prices. Why did that happen? Because we don't know as individuals, we don't know as human beings what works when. Just because it has worked in some country doesn't mean that we can't. One, it doesn't mean that it's going to work everywhere. But if contextualized, if you can take an Uber and contextualize it for India so that it uses lesser data, it uses, it has support available in 20 different Indian languages or all the official languages in India, you're able to contextualize it for the economy that you're going to launch it in, then there's nothing stopping it. I did not predict Zoom was going to become that big. Even 2 months ago, if somebody asked me, what do you think is going to be the most profitable company to invest in? The answer would probably have been Zoom. A lot of people made a lot of money on Zoom, but and I'm not getting into the security issues, guys. If you have questions about that, I'm sure you can find it on the internet. I think it's a mix of both propaganda and the fact that Zoom grew too big too fast, so they were not able to deal with a lot of the security issues. But the fact that it's still one of the most user intuitive solutions available, the fact that it was so simple to use, the fact that it took webinars into account, all of that made sure that the product was so good that you did not have a good enough alternative, which is why people used it. So imagine if the person who started Zoom, somebody had told them, 5 years ago or 2 years ago, what are you doing? It's a waste of time. Skype exists, TeamViewer exists, so many other companies exist. Google Hangouts exist. Kya bana rahe ho aap ye? It's a waste of time. If he had listened to them, then Zoom would not have existed today. And forget about any of the repercussions of the crisis Zoom is going through now. But he's made enough money right now to not have to work for the next 10 generations. So stop listening to your naysayers, be curious, and if you really believe in the idea, take the leap of faith. That's going to be the end of the presentation in this particular format for now. My name is Meghdut Chowdhury. Feel free to connect with me on any of the platforms. I am quite responsive on LinkedIn. My name, you can just search with my name. You can look me up on my website, meghdutchowdhury.com. My team updates it quite regularly, I hope. And I have an email as well, meghdut@technoindiaeducation.com. If you, have some ideas, you want to get in touch with me, feel free. So yes, I guess that brings us to the end of this part of the session. Gurjashan, now it's up to you how you want to do the Q&A. Thank you very much, everyone. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so
Great
much.
place to study. Yes.
Thank you. Well, we got some questions on the Q&A panel for you to answer.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah, the first of the question is from Ajay. It's a very generic question, but I think very broad at the same time. What is business and how can we do that?
Okay. Business, aka dhanda in Hindi. Well, I mean, I don't know if you have any people in your family who's run a traditional business. You can ask them what exactly it is. A business is basically you put a product or a service in a marketplace, and people choose to buy this product, and if they buy it, you make money. I guess that's the simplest way you can say what a business is. Of course, traditional businesses or essentially profit-driven businesses are very different from impact-driven businesses. If you want to know more about that, I can discuss.
All right.
Yeah.
The next question says, how can we start our own companies? I think that you
If
have
you
pretty
have,
light on.
I have covered, I think, as much as possible. If any of you want to ask a very pertinent question about an idea you have, maybe we can bring a few of you on as panelists as well, and you can ask your questions live. But if you have an idea and you're looking for particular advice on it, I think it'll be easier to start a company. I think we spoke about it in a lot of detail. I mean, I think the one thing that I look in when I'm reviewing companies, be it for hackathons or be it for various entrepreneurship events or pitch events or business plan competitions, is the kind of team that you have. I think a good team basically is 50% of the job done when you're building a company. You need to make sure that you surround yourselves with people smarter than you. We Indians, we find it very hard to surround ourselves with people smarter than us, because then we're like, the ego may hurt over that. So that's a problem. But I think the best CEOs in the world are people who understand truly that they will not be able to do the job of the CTO, the CMO, and all the other CXOs. So you need to hire people, or you need to surround at the very beginning, surround yourself with people who can do that particular facet of your job better than you can. You can be a CEO, come up with the idea, doesn't matter. It's good to have a team, because without your army, you're going to go nowhere. And then whatever your idea is, just float it in the market, do a competitor analysis. I think this is very important. Finding out from the internet, you have so many tools. A lot of startups, in fact, tell us when we ask them, oh, who are your main competitors? First thing they'll be says, oh, we have no competition only. Yeah, it's not possible. There are 7 billion people out there in the world. Even if you take 1% of them are fairly smart people, somebody has definitely thought of that already. So So before saying that no, there is no competition, जाओ थोड़ा सा study करो. Go and do Google search, go to the 10th page of Google, and if you don't find something that is relevant, then come and tell me that okay, now this does not exist, because it mostly does exist. Also, just because it exists does not mean that you shouldn't do it. So you need to find a process innovation. It could exist in a particular form, but you can add various services to it, which would make it more attainable or more accessible for your target group or target audience. So that's another innovation that you can do in your company. But in general, you just have to start. There's nothing to do. You don't have to sign up for it. You just have to create a brand name, provide a service, and see if people locally would be interested to take it on as well. Somebody asked me, I remember once, was I don't have any tech person on my team. They had a solution which was, if I don't remember, it was a mental health app, and they wanted people to they wanted students to deal with their mental health issues in colleges. It's a big deal. We don't have as much support as we have in school. A lot of people stay far away from their homes and they miss their parents and all of that. So they said, oh, I want to start it, but I don't have a tech person on my team. I'm a business school student. I don't know how to code a website. How will I make a chatbot and all of that? And I was like, if you really want to do it, why don't you create a WhatsApp group with the 60 people in your class and start providing the service to those people locally? If it works as an idea, if it works for 60 people in your class, it can work for 60,000 people as well. If the idea works, it can be implementable on any scale. It does not matter if you're doing it at a scale of 1 million people or if you're doing it for 10 people. That is the minimum viable product. Your WhatsApp group, where you're promoting your service for the 10 people. For example, say somebody had an idea about giving food, distribute sometimes you're at your hostels, you cook too much food and then it goes to waste, or you're too little food and you want to eat something else. So why don't you have heads of 10 different hostels on a WhatsApp group and exchange food from now and then whatever the value is made out of that, you can create a business out of that as well. All of this is a possibility. You can create a business sitting at home. It's literally one WhatsApp group away. If you have a good team, that's well and good. If you don't, look up on LinkedIn, put up a message on LinkedIn, hey, I'm looking for XYZ people for my company, and if you can sell them on the idea, why not? It's going to work. So yeah, if you have particular ideas about your particular business that you would like to start, happy to talk about that.
All right. So since you spoke about boot camps, there is Mahinder who wants you to elaborate on that a bit.
On boot camps, right? So I can talk a little bit about offbeat boot camps actually, because we do that quite regularly. So there's this one venture that I had taken up on last year, which is this School of the Future, as Gurjashan had mentioned. And one of the things we do there is where we run a bunch of boot camps. So be it on Salesforce, for example, let's look at some of the technologies that are very, very useful right now or will continue being useful in the near future. Let's say things like drones, things like artificial intelligence, machine learning, things like Salesforce, even code, like any of the coding languages, be it Python, be it Node.js, full stack development, any of this stuff you can run as a bootcamp. And bootcamps are basically shortened, very condensed versions of regular programs, right? So if you're currently pursuing computer science, you probably don't have time to do a 3-month crash course on something. So a bootcamp essentially takes all of that content from that 3-month program and condenses it into a 1.5, 2 week long program or a 1 week long program, wherein it gives you enough skills. First of all, there is an entry criteria mostly to boot camps. When you enter, you have to have a certain amount of background knowledge. But apart from that, it's something that can help you accelerate your career in a particular field. So if you want to get very, very focused learning on, say, Salesforce for web apps, or Salesforce for, or let's say any of the other languages, say you want to do a bootcamp on R, or any of the other data science languages, we keep running them as well. I'm sure Gurjashan will be a good resource on that. I'm sure Great Place to Study also has a lot of resources available. You can talk to them about this bit. And for Offbeat as well, we keep doing it. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. You will see about the boot camps that are coming on. And just Google, boot camps. There's so many possibilities of boot camps right now. I think physical boot camps are going to be a bit harder to do. But digitally, there's so many of them available. It's all about being curious enough to grab those opportunities. That's it.
Yeah, you said it rightly, Meghdut. So students who are looking to, attend boot camps can directly see, on the platform where Meghdut had mentioned, or they can write to me as well, also to inquire. Uh, the next question comes from Manjunath. Is franchise route a good way to start a business?
I am a bit conflicted about. I also don't think I have the exact right answer for this because I've never run a franchise business. But what I can say is, if you look at um, startups, it's a very different process that you involve as opposed to a regular traditional company. Franchises make a lot more sense for traditional organizations than it does for startups, because for startups, you want, if you're looking at scale, you need to own, you need to be a proprietor for the entire scheme of things in order to run it successfully. So if you're planning to build a tech startup, definitely don't go for a franchisee. It's not going to be very useful. Franchises work well for brick and mortar businesses. For example, if you want to start a kids school, it's a good idea to do a franchisee model, because then you don't have to go through all of those physical locations. But most successful startups have lean teams, 10, 15, 20 people, and you can still provide services to a million people. So for that, you don't need to look at the franchising model at all.
All right. The next question is also from Manjunath. What is the best way to commence business? Is it proprietorship or a private limited company?
Again, tricky question, but I would say, especially in the Indian context, makes sense for a private limited company, because then you have limited liability. So when you finish off, I mean, say for example, if the business does not work out, then it's easier to move away from the business if you have a private limited company as opposed to a proprietorship. So yeah, definitely for a startup, yes, private limited.
All right. Should every college start an incubation center for better results? This is from Mr.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Every single, if you have any college representatives here and you do not have an incubation center, there's a lot of possibilities, a lot of very successful models that you can take a look at as well. You can also get in touch with me. In fact, I actually personally help a lot of colleges set up incubation centers as well, apart from running our own incubators. And one thing that you need to know is that not even the IITs do it very well. Running an incubation center is not easy. Just because you have money does not mean you can run a very successful incubation center. A lot of the IITs, NITs also sometimes reach out for help when it comes to figuring out their strategies for it, because there's a lot of government funding available. If you are the college representatives, you might know about that. There is DST, of course, the Department of Science and Technology. There's the Untitled Innovation Labs. You can apply for funding up to 10 crore rupees for 5 years of running the incubator. But the the difficult part, I believe, in running incubators is that academicians, it's very hard to convert academicians into entrepreneurs, because very more often than not, academicians don't come with the entrepreneurial mindset. They come from a more traditional teaching background, which means that they find it a lot harder to move towards the entrepreneurial side of things, which is why most incubators fail within few months or a year of them starting up. Even if they have funds, they just don't know what to do with it. So we definitely need a lot more entrepreneurs entering the education space. I think that would be a very interesting thing to see for education in India moving forward and becoming more future proof. So if any of you are thinking of becoming entrepreneurs in the education space, please reach out to us. We are always happy to talk about people who can run incubators within institutions as well. And I'm sure every institution in the country faces issues because there's not enough people who can run incubators. So you need to have a very specific skill set to be able to run the incubator. Absolutely recommended. Every institution should, but what they're going to do with it, you might have to reach out to some experts on that for help, because it's not easy running an incubator. It's a lot of work.
Very well. The next question comes from Daksh. How do you think that music fulfills the need of the customer? I think this is more inclined to your other, venture that you started, which was Blooper
Sure.
House.
To Blooper House, and not just Blooper House, actually, I'll talk a little bit about my music journey as well, because it's something that not only gives me a lot of peace, because music is such a beautiful thing that I'm a hardcore music enthusiast to the point of being an audiophile. Like on average, I listen to 4 to 5 hours of new music every day. just as background. I love discovering new stuff. And this I've always been like that. I grew up in a Bengali household, and we Bengalis are very musical in general. So I grew up listening to my grandmother doing music and my mom singing and all of that. So I've always been brought up in that environment. And what I feel that music has a transformative ability, just like education has a transformative ability to take people out of poverty. Music has a transformative ability to take people out of sadness. And especially at a time like this right now, I think that one thing that has been keeping us sane on social media is the amount of music that people are making. So we started this one venture the first day that quarantine started. It's called Ek Saath Quarantine Heroes, and it was just a Google, a Facebook group where people could come and join and share whatever they're making, just to add a bit of spark to people's lives. And it's grown to a community of about 1,000 people strong and very high engagement every day. About 40-50 people post new music, dance forms, a lot of arts. And it's just, as a consumer, as somebody who is tired of seeing so much misinformation, fake news, just so much negativity in times of coronavirus, number of deaths, number of people affected, music, I think, is something that gives you a sigh of relief. You can look past all of those negativity and kind of just be yourself and take a step back and breathe. So music is very important for me. Two of my ventures are in fact in the music space. One being Blooper House Studios, which is a recording studio in Calcutta, which I've been running for about 10 years now, and it has been very, very successful. In fact, to this day, I think I've had the most amount of social impact with the business, because I've not really made a lot of money, but I've changed a lot of people's lives. And every musician in the city who has come out with an album has recorded something or the other at Blooper House at some point. So I'm very fortunate on that. And the other business being Top Cat CCU, which is my music venue, live music venue. So Calcutta has always been big on live music, but ever since the days of Someplace Else being obviously the first live music venue in all of India, it started about 25 years ago. There was a lot of selling out to cover music. So there was not a lot of venues doing live music anymore. So about 4 years ago, I started looking for a place where my clients from Blooper House could become live performers as well and perform their original music. Hard Rock Cafe was not doing a good enough job. Someplace Else was not promoting live music which was not cover music. So which is why I made Top Cat CCU. And in the last year, we've done more than 200 gigs, live gigs, and from all kinds of genres, from electronica to pop to Rabindra Sangeet to ghazals to electro, Indian fusion to live bands, rock, jazz, blues, all of that. So very, very grateful for the kind of love that I've gotten for Top Cat CCU as well, and it's become one of the cornerstones of independent music in the east of India, along with three other venues in the country, one in Bangalore, Humming Tree, one in Bombay. You have Fandom, Gillies, or is that in Bangalore? And you have Famous Studios, right? So, yeah. So, other than the couple of other music venues for West Bengal and for the east of India, I think we've made a good job with Top Cat, and I will always continue to support live musicians because it's something. The kind of joy that they give to us musicians in general is unfounded. So, yeah.
All right. Next question is from Ananya. She asks, how do we get self-motivation? I have an idea, but I lack the self-motivation to implement it.
Ananya, if you're still watching, if you want to come and talk about your idea, I can help you with it. But again, this self-motivation thing, I think right now is the hardest time to be self-motivated, when the entire world can't stop talking about death and destruction and how the world is coming to an end and we're in the midst of World War III, and all of this negativity and how many people got infected in the village close to you. It's very hard to be self-motivated, even for me. I mean, normally I'm a super, super optimistic person. Anybody who knows me personally will also know that. But it gets very hard sometimes. You wake up in the morning and you're like, oh my God, I have to live the exact same day that I lived yesterday. And, you can't leave your house. You have to just be, in that space. So it's not easy, Ananya, and I sympathize with you, and I hope I could help a little bit on that. One good way to motivate yourself is to, what I try to practice is kind of not put too much pressure on myself, because sometimes I feel that as a young person growing up amidst the corona crisis right now, we're not equipped. We're not, equipped to deal with a situation like this. And in general, young people have to face a lot of negativity in general. Millennials, they don't know what's going on. They're not practical enough. Blah blah blah. We're still trying to find out what we're good for. What are we made to do in life? Then you have to take a decision. Which college do I go to? Do I take up this job? Should I start this company? There's a lot of things happening. So, good way to motivate yourself is not take things too too strongly. If you start your venture in 6 months instead of tomorrow, I don't think the world is going to change completely. If you do it and it goes well, then it's great. But don't put too much pressure on yourself. Try watching some motivational videos on topics that actually make you happy. So, for example, I say that to a lot of engineers, essentially, that a lot of engineers grew up, say, in a musical household, or in like a household where they did a lot of dancing, or they have other interests which are apart from engineering as well. If you have an interest which is apart from your topic, but it's something that makes you very happy, try and read up more about it, and try and devote yourselves more to things that truly you are passionate about, because you never know, you could end up creating a solution wherein you're able to use your learnings from your engineering background or from your business background, and use it to spread happiness and joy on stuff that you do from your day-to-day activities, on things that you love. Through, maybe you are able to create a business out of a dance studio or a music studio, or a live aggregating platform for the arts. We never know, something that makes you happy. Make sure your business idea is well aligned on that, because it helps with keeping our motivation alive. If you're truly passionate about it, you will not think of it as work.
Very well. I think the next two questions can be combined together. So it is
Mhm.
from Jyotirmoy and Yashwant. So one
Mhm.
asks how to implement an idea. We have more ideas, but we can't implement. Where to start first? And the second question is for a product idea, how do you find the elements to make it, like manufacturers, etc.?
So before you get, I'll deal with the second question first. I think the first one I've spoken about quite a bit already. If you have a product that you want to build, it's a lot more cost intensive to build a product company than it is to build a service company. I think because products require a lot of cost. But here, what the interesting part is, if you are able to create your MVP. Remember, I spoke about the minimum viable product, and in a case of a product company, this would be your prototype. If you can create a well-functioning prototype, and then you approach an incubator, an accelerator, or a mentor who would support you on that journey, then I think you can have a lot of impact going forth. One of the things that I think that a lot of manufacturing companies in general, if they're forward-looking enough, they look for is ways to acquire other products. Sometimes they want to bring those products onto the line. You can actually make a bang for a buck. You can make a lot of money if you are able to create a very successful product and create a small unit which produces it, which later on gets purchased, gets bought out by a bigger company. And of course, if your mentor is someone who is well connected to the product ecosystem, or to the manufacturing ecosystem, they can help spread the word quite a lot. So I don't think that'll be a problem.
All right. The next question also comes from Ananya. Do you think college helps in entrepreneurial career as going to college has a financial burden?
Yes, this is. I don't know exactly from which perspective she wants the answer. Yes, colleges have a financial burden, but also colleges are the places where you get to meet it's your first professional network, are the people that you are in college. And I believe, I've been to a bunch of business schools, and I've also studied engineering. In India, first we become engineers, and we figure out what we want to do with our lives. So, I'm a computer engineer myself. So, people who I met during my computer engineering time are some of the people that, in some way or the other I've worked with as well, or, with people I've met in my business school, for example. It's happened a lot more. I've started so many businesses with them, so many entrepreneurial ventures, projects, initiatives. So take that time that you go to college not as a financial, don't think of it as a financial burden, but think of it as the first playground or first sandbox for your professional network. These people that you meet right now are professionally speaking, might be people that you work with later. So seize that opportunity, and along with that, focus on your studies as well. It's very, if you are not good at what you do, nobody's going to come and buy your products. If your products are substandard, and you have people coming in from various good colleges and going way beyond you with the kind of services they offer, obviously people will not sit around waiting to buy your products or services, right? So focus on school. Those 4 years, you're not going to get it back. So it doesn't matter if you get a 9 point or not. At least try to attend as many classes and make most of your, if not your time, then your dad's money. Just make sure you make a good use of that as well. It's important.
All right. So next question is very specific. It comes from Rupal. How does equity dilution work for a startup?
From Rupal. Hi Rupal, where are you? You were watching. That's great. How does equity dilution? Now, so originally speaking, a lot of the Indian mindset for entrepreneurs is very different from the American mindset for entrepreneurs. When you're creating your company, you need to first figure out which category you fall into. Are you making this company so that you can hold on to it for all of your life, or are you making this company so that you can exit within 3 years and make a lot of money for it? Your answer with equity dilution lies in that. If I want to run with this company all my life, and if it's something that I want to be associated with for the next 50 years, especially in a traditional business, I will not dilute any equity at all. I will build the business in a way wherein I own as much of the ownership of it as possible. If, on the other hand, I am willing to increase the valuation of my company, and I am willing to use my company as a leverage point for my next company and the company after that, and I want to become a serial entrepreneur, then you need to start very smartly diluting equity. Equity dilution happens at various stages. The very first stage that you might want to dilute equity at would probably be at the level of incubation, because being a part of a well-structured incubation system is important. Your incubator is going to charge anything between 2 to 10% of equity. 10% I think is quite a bit. I think 2 to 5% is a bit more reasonable, because otherwise it gets very hard to pull the company up later on. The next stage of dilution, of course, that when you're beginning the company, I'm guessing you already have a fairly equal split between the various founders. So I'm not getting into that. Then again, equally, the founders will need to release a bit of their equity or dilute a bit of their equity as and when they go through the various funding rounds. So by the seed round, ideally, you should still hold up at least 85% of the company, I would say, by seed round. And then again, depending on how big you want to grow the business, for a Series A, Series B, depending on the kind of deal that you have with your investor, you can have equity dilutions. One thing I do believe in is that under no circumstance especially if you're a motivated entrepreneur and you look at yourself as a lifelong entrepreneur, uh, you will probably not be very happy diluting more than 50% of your company, because then you kind of lose interest in the company itself. Then you don't think of it as your own company. So if you're, irrespective of if a person is offering you a lot of money for a majority stake in the company, I would think twice before doing it, especially if I want to continue uh, being motivated by being part of that company for a long time. So yeah, up to 49% equity dilution is okay, as long as you don't lose the rights of the company itself.
All right. So the next question. So there are three questions which are almost similar to each other. One comes from Aditya. He asks, "What should we keep in our mind before starting a startup?" The second question is, "What are the various things to keep in mind before uh, starting a business?" And third one is a little specific. What are the various things to keep in mind before starting a clothing brand?
A clothing brand. I like the idea of a clothing brand. I think clothing brands are a very innovative space to be in general. But I can't speak of the post-COVID era because nobody knows anything right now. But in general, there's a lot of innovation happening in the clothing space, especially if you're in the upcycled clothing space. If you're looking at building a clothing brand, I would definitely say, rather than starting another company which sells jeans, or just starting another clothing line, run of the mill, look at a sustainable clothing brand, because people are making more and more sustainable choices in their lives now than ever. If you have the possibility to look at prospective upcycled brands, say using waste from other clothes and making, or using old clothes and making new clothes, it's something very trendy, and some very good companies have come out of that field. I can talk about Twirl, I think does that. Lata Sita in Kolkata, run by this dear friend called Meghna. It's a big upcycle brand, except they're very boutique fashion, right? So you have one piece of cloth which is very unique because it's made from a sari. So a sari being converted into a jumpsuit or something like that. It's a very interesting business model. I would definitely urge you to look at interesting business models like that. Think of brands. If you're looking at a clothing brand, look at people who will be buying the clothes rather than making generic brands for everybody. Think of making brands for specific kind of people. For example, streetwear has become a big thing in India, especially since say Gully Boy became a big movie. Rappers wear a lot of street clothes, so you might want to look at, and that's just an idea. But look at a big target group and what they would want to wear, and kind of figure out if your clothing brand could be merged onto that field. Something that, for example, Manyavar did a while back. It's a Kolkata-based brand, but they've become one of the biggest ethnic wear brands in the world because, I mean, I think they're the biggest probably, because they focused on one particular segment of the population, that we are going to give people clothes for their weddings or for their Indian wear in general. So especially for a clothing brand, I think you need to know your target consumer very well. One thing that all of you said, what is it that I can do in order to start a company? Definitely one of the most important things is understand your consumer, because you if you're starting a business and you don't understand your consumer, your products or services are not going to sell. You will also have to do a bit of competitor analysis. I've been speaking for more than an hour and a half now. I think it's my words are getting a bit tied up, but competitor analysis again is a very important part. Knowing who you're going up against, also knowing your worth is important. At the same time, knowing that, okay, I will probably not be able to compete with Google if I start something tomorrow and I've been in business for 6 months. It's important to know that as well. On the same side, it's also important to know that Google, if you're doing something very well which Google sees as a threat, they would probably buy it from you and you'll stand to make a lot of money doing that. So both the sides stand. Know your customer, know your competitors, and at the end, know your big play. If you're going to stick with the company for all your life, or if you want to sell it off, then play it in that field, and who knows, maybe you're going to be sitting on piles of cash tomorrow. I hope you do.
All right. So next one is a pretty interesting question. So Lena asks, what businesses do you think will do well post-corona?
Oh, wow. Every business that can be done online is going to do very well. If any of you have ideas for education, like ed tech businesses, education through technology, get in touch with me. I would be very interested to talk about it. In fact, you as well, Gurjashan. I think we need to resume
Sure.
our conversations with
Yes.
GPTS as well. But anything I think that has the tech angle to it are the ones which are going to be future proof. Tomorrow is going to be very different from what we are doing today. I think this was a bit of a knee jerk that we had. Coronavirus really showed us, one, you've been treating planet Earth way too badly. You guys need to take a step
True.
back and let me be. That was the first lesson. And lesson number two, every single business that you thought was foolproof, and all these traditional brick and mortar businesses that they thought that they would never get disrupted, got disrupted overnight. So it's going to be very interesting times. I don't think I have the answer. I have seen some very interesting solutions come out of the hackathons that we've done in the last couple of weeks, and I don't know, I think I've gone through like 500 pitches over the last couple of weeks, and super
Wow.
interesting ideas coming from the world of entertainment. For example, running virtual parties across the world at the same time. We're doing stuff with engagement of communities. I think this is something that I truly believe. If any of you want to talk about this as well, I'm very happy to talk about these questions. Building communities, I think, is going to be more important than ever, especially building curated communities around particular topics, be it music or dance or keeping motivation up or health or fitness. Those communities are the things which give us hope at times like this. So anything that gives us hope, anything that makes sure we don't have to leave our homes and we can work from home basically 365 days a year, because companies are also going to realize that a lot of time is wasted doing business meetings and in transportation. A lot more Indian companies are going to advocate for work from home as much as maybe European companies do, because in most European companies you can automatically work from home a couple of times a week, especially if you're a senior business manager or mid to upper level management. In India, I think that's going to happen as well. A lot more people are going to work from home, which means that companies will save money on TA and feeding people in the offices and all of that. So interesting times to come. Every single business vertical is going to get changed completely. And I definitely, if you guys are working on sustainability products, guys, keep up the good fight. We need a lot more sustainable products. We need to stop becoming such a burden for planet Earth, or else we'll have a lot more than the coronavirus to deal with. Yeah.
True, true. All right. So next question comes from Lucrezia. She says, "What about a consumer good product tied to a marketable and socially impactful idea?"
So Lucrezia and I have actually been speaking about consumer goods products. She's a friend of mine from Italy who's very interested in becoming an investor for Indian startups as well. And she currently, if I'm not mistaken, she was working with Luxottica, which is the mother brand of Ray-Ban and all of the big. So she has got a lot of experience with consumer goods in general. So Lucrezia, if you're watching, I think the purchasing power of people is going to be at a record low after the COVID crisis, because traditional marketplaces have fallen apart, and people will be thinking 5 times before buying something. That fast fashion, for example, I think is going to take a big hit, because people will not be willing to buy as much fast fashion if the choice is between by having a new black t-shirt with a slightly lower neckline than your rations for the next day. Right? So I think it's important that we recognize that essential products are going to, so consumer goods rather than consumer goods, consumer essential goods, I think, are going to be slightly more of a vogue in times to come. And I definitely think any business that we're doing right now, we need to look at the angle of what we're doing in terms of impact, especially social impact, be it on giving back to those who are less privileged than us, or taking a little bit of the strain away from Mother Earth, so that we can really look forward to making our solutions future proof as well. A lot more people are going to be opting for sustainable, eco-friendly, organic solutions on whatever consumer goods they're buying. And we've seen some of the big companies actually make that shift as well. We've seen Nike making shoes from completely waste products, and making shoes from plastic, also recycle shoes, but in bulk. And bigger companies like even Zara, we've seen them come up with campaigns on recycled clothes. So every consumer goods product that we have around us is going to see a definite change, and we need to be on top of that change going forward. We'll talk about that in more detail, Chris. We'll have a conversation about that.
All right. All right. So next question comes from Yashwant. How do you excel your company with a similar product that already exists, similar to Zoom or Skype that you have mentioned?
So here's where I think we can take the example of Zoom and Skype itself. What Zoom particularly did was it did something called process innovation. So Skype already existed, and they also did a bunch of product innovation. So Skype already existed, but one of the big drawbacks of Skype was it was drawing data from the person who was creating the Skype call, right? So people who were joining in, very little data would go from the people who were joining the call. So on the client side, but on the server side, there was a lot more data which was being fed, which meant that the calls were usually very laggy. There was a lot of distraction, and you could only add a limited number of people onto the calls. What Zoom did very smartly was it opened up the calls for up to 100 people even on their free licenses, by cutting the time that they created a time sharing model. So they cut it up at 40 minutes. And what they did very interestingly was now it became a client side operation. So whether you were online from your laptop or from your phone or from your tablet, you were using your own internet, and that was your contribution to the call, which meant that there was not too much of a burden on anyone, even if there were 100 people on the call. So that was smart. Another thing that I did was they created a more accessible funnel. So funnels in a business terminology, a funnel is the number of people that you have using the company at the very beginning. So if you want to create a freemium model, for example, which is initially available for free, you later want people to pay, or if you have a business model where initially you want to get a lot of enterprise customers, you need to give them a taste of the product. If people like the taste of the product, they will continue buying. And it's like a drug. If you like Zoom, you're going to not go away from Zoom and do any other Skype or any other team viewer or any other product. You will continue on it because you become used to it. Human beings, we don't like change very much. We like being in our bubbles. We're very averse to change. So for people like that, you need to create a big funnel, which is get a lot of people to use your product for free. And then when they see that, okay, there are some more features available which we might buy into, that's when you get your enterprise solution. So that's why it's like a funnel. It's big on top, and then it becomes thin at the bottom, which is where the paying customers come in. So which is why the number of people on the Zoom platform went up so fast. They also gave the possibility of having a webinar, which I think other than the Skype's highest model, you could not do a webinar that simply. And now it just became a lot more accessible for people to do webinars. For you and me to sit around and do a webinar for like 1,000 people, if you had to do it, a couple of years ago, it was very difficult. You had to get very professional software to do it. Now you can do it by paying a few, $40, $50 to Zoom. So I think it's just a more accessible solution, and they did process innovation and product innovation, which is what set them apart and gave them so much growth. So yeah, that's important.
All right. Next question comes from Himanshu. Is it possible that you can get stuck before starting a company due to legal constraints, considering India's situation?
Oh yeah, you can get. It's better to get stuck before you start the company than doing it after the company, because after you started the company, you get stuck with legal constraints, then you're going to jail. At least before the company, yeah, just do your research well and have like a good CA on your payroll, or have a CA that you can talk to, who can tell you if all the steps that you're taking are good as well. But better before than after.
All right. So next one is again from Ananya. I think this is a follow-up question to what she asked before. The thing is, for college, she's taken a huge loan, and then even the idea that would need some finance, but with already a loan to repay, how would she go about it?
So first thing I would suggest, Ananya, is get rid of your negative mindset. That is something that's not doing you any favors. You've already, say in the business terminology, this is called a sunk cost. The fact that you've already paid, you've taken a loan and you've already used it to pay for your college education, it's a sunk cost. Every time if you keep thinking about this cost, it's going to become an impediment to creativity. It's going to be an impediment to you making an actual change by innovating. So what I would suggest is forget about whatever cost has happened in the past. You can't take that back, and you're already in college, so you're getting some value out of it, right? So what you can do right now is think of ways of repaying that loan even before you can start, before you can finish college. So one of the best ways of doing that is through online. It could be anything from providing services online as a freelancer, for which you don't really need to make any money. There's a lot more possibilities for that on now than ever before. I know of students, I don't know if they're watching right now, but we have students at Technical University who buy and sell domains, and that's a huge business, and they're able to make money sitting at home. If you have a particular skill that you think is monetizable and you can propose it to people outside, through Zoom, for example, start doing that. Start taking classes for young kids online. So there's a million ways of making money online. And if you're able to do that, then maybe you'll be able to repay your loan much faster. But just think of, and don't think of taking more loans for, first of all, no, very few people, especially nowadays, take debt financing. When you take a loan for a business, it's called debt financing. Less and less people do it because you have something called equity. You own the company. You can give up, you can give up a bit of your company's shares in order to make some money. That's always possible. Focus on building a product. If your product actually makes sense, and if people are interested in it, they will buy the product. If you have a particular idea for your product, Ananya, reach out to me on LinkedIn, share your idea with me. I will try to give you some mentorship on what the next steps should be for you, particularly, but definitely try to be positive, Ananya. Everyone's going through a tough time. A lot of people have loans for various different reasons. People will be taking out massive loans after the coronavirus is over as well, because people will not be able to feed themselves otherwise. So it's tough times for everyone. To stop thinking about that every single day. Be positive, be optimistic that tomorrow is going to be a better day. We'll find a way. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. We'll talk.
All right. The next question is more from the broader perspective from Shalini. Do you think that India lacks lot ideas and innovation in the field of IoTs? Same, I have a vision of some IoT based product, but lack some basic processing idea. How can I proceed to try, learn, and explore more?
Okay, so I don't think India is lacking very much in the field of IoT, because there's quite a few very interesting business models which have come out as well. It's becoming quite a crowded space, in fact. So at Techno India, we started an IoT lab in end of 2018. It was one of the first IoT labs in the east of India, and we've done trainings for very many students, faculty members as well, people who were previously in electronics. We've moved a lot of people to IoT and connected devices. Depending on what your idea is, I'd be very curious to hear about it. Of course, you can write to me, reach out to me. Happy to discuss more in detail. But definitely, there's a lot of ideas happening in the IoT space. And in terms of home automation, be it in terms of agricultural automation, I think there's a very prospective field for India, considering we're a very agro-based industry. So if your IoT product can solve problems for farmers in mass, I think that's a great space to be in. I don't know what exactly your idea is. Happy to talk.
All right. The next question is, I think, from an existing student of your college. So his name is Abhipreet. He
Okay.
says basically, I'm working for my startup based on agri-tech, but to cater the crisis, me and my team is working on a project which can eradicate it to a level, but as maximum of the hackathons have ended till now. So amidst having a prototype design and a POC, we are unable to push it further. Can you suggest what we should do to proceed it?
Aviprit, send me your pitch deck on LinkedIn. We'll talk. No worries. We'll take a look. Just because hackathons are over does not mean the space for creativity and innovation is over. We'll take it out live.
The next question is also from an existing student of yours. His name is Partha. As he is studying CSE in TIU, but is a graphic designer by passion and have a startup idea with the design school of TIU, which is by Intuit Lab. Will he be allowed to explore it? He wants to ask, and he want to make a local design brand with the help of creative and passionate students of design college, and also wants to fill the design demand of Kolkata by passionate students.
I mean, there's nothing of it not being allowed to work. Only thing, Partho, is that at the design school, it's a very high grade international school which focuses on visual communication, digital design, on brand design, a lot of these things. The reason why we started the school in the first place is because there isn't enough talent in Calcutta to cater to its needs. So thinking of a business comes later. First, people have to actually be on that global platform. Having said that, if any of these kids are good, they can definitely come and be part of the school. And if you yourself is somebody who's on the same level as any of the faculty or any of the instructors or facilitators at Ecole Intuit Lab, Kolkata by Techno India University, why not? We are always happy to hear about your ideas. It is purely dependent on how good you are and how well trained you are in the field of design. Just because somebody made a few posters for college does not make them a designer. You will have to be focused enough to be able to make serious money for brands for it. So yeah, happy to take a look at the work that you're doing, at your portfolio. Write to me, reach out to me, and happy to take it forward live.
All right, Meghdut. So that was the last question for the day. I think you can,
It's exactly 6 p.m.
yes, as we had predicted it. So I
Yeah.
think you can take a sigh of relief, and probably you can add something, that could leave something of value for our attendees, and we can move towards the closing for our session for the day.
Sure, I'm super glad we did this, guys. In general, for all, I'm guessing a lot of you joined from TIU as well. For all of those who've seen me in and around college, I mean, I love talking about entrepreneurship in general because I really see a lot of you becoming entrepreneurs tomorrow. And if I am able to have even a 1% contribution to it, be it in terms of mentorship, providing incubation, helping you guys shape up your ideas so that they're future proof, I would be very, very glad. We've been doing that for 3, 4 years now. We've done that for hundreds of your seniors, and I'm happy to do it for you guys as well. Never stop being curious, never stop asking questions, because the future rests with you. And at the end of the day, if we grow together as a society, that's what makes not just any institution grow, but the country grow in general. So keep being curious and write out to me, reach out to me. Happy to talk at any given point of time. Thank you so much to Great Place to Study for the lovely initiative of the knowledge webinars. Thank you, Gurjashan, for being a great host and a
Thank you.
moderator. Thank you for going through the questions with us patiently. And thank you to my team as well, Disha and Shritama, who've been there on the call very silently, but they've kept track of the situation, and they do that for all our webinars. Thank you very much, guys. Hope to see you all soon at whatever the next webinar is going to be. Till then, adios and see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Meghdut. Thank you so much, Sritoma and Disha as well. All right, guys, if you have any of the follow-up questions or you think any of your questions that you have missed asking, feel free to write it to me or Meghdut. And I'm also going to leave my email address in the group chat so that you all can reach out to me. Just give me a second. All right, I have left my email address as well. So thank you so much for being the wonderful audience and listening to our today's webinar. Feel free to check out our product as well as other the details on the other webinars, which is there on the link that I shared earlier. And I'm also going to leave our Facebook and other social media handles on the group chat once again. Feel free to follow us there and stay updated with all the information on various careers. So, all right then, stay safe and stay indoors. I think we all will be through this particular troublesome situation soon. And thank you. Thank you, everybody, once again.